What's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into Bill's Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, our first live show in a few weeks, but start of NFL free agency seemed like a good time to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about maybe flirting with the idea last week. That fell through. Just not much to talk about, and then on top of it, just other stuff going on. But it also was on our minds, like, hey, why don't we just go live on the day of the calendar starting and free agency going underway, and so on and so forth. So things are good. I mean, I love that the Bills already kind of did a thing to me here. Not that I'm complaining, but I go out there and I make a thumbnail and even kind of hint at the idea of like not too much to move the needle going on right now. And then next thing you know, within 2 hours of us going live, boom, they got the ball rolling, we can say.
Yeah, so the Bills, for those that don't know, and it's confusing. NFL free agency technically opens today. This is the start of the league year at 4 p.m. Eastern, but the legal tampering is not a real phrase, by the way, but it's what the NFL uses, started on Monday, and that's when deals have been started to get agreed to. The Bills trade for DJ Moore was officially processed today, so he is officially a Buffalo Bill. Trading away Taron Johnson to the Raiders for a swap of a 6th and 7th round pick is official. And then the move Luka is alluding to is where we're going to start tonight. The Bills make, I would say, a decent sized splash in free agency as they sign Bradley Chubb to a 3-year, $43.5 million deal. He's a former first round pick in the same draft class as Josh Allen. The deal can be worth up to $50 million. The big number to me is $29 million, which tells me that when the details of that contract comes out, it's probably going to be a 2-year deal with an easy out for the Bills. But Luka, what was your reaction on the heels of, we get this a lot every year, the Bills were in on Max Crosby. The Bills were in on Trey Hendrickson. Ultimately, they land on Bradley Chubb. How do you feel about it?
I like it. I wouldn't say I love it, but I like it. I would say also on top of it, based on term money and everything like that we saw, I'm not as I wouldn't even say I'm not upset or confused or anything like that either with this. Similar, and I'm doing this in similar light to the DJ Moore trade, where it was like, hey, we acquired DJ Moore, and then you all of a sudden get the terms and conditions of it all, and you're like, oh, okay. That changes my feelings on it overall as the entire package. But with Bradley Chubb, I mean, realistically, it's like, hey, if you can get the player that he was pre-injury 2 seasons ago, that was his career year. I mean, that was the best he had played to date. He was phenomenal. He is still a good player. Even when he came back from injury last season, he wasn't the dynamic every down guy that, you saw coming out of NC State and hoped he could be the game wrecker. And at that time, side by side with Von Miller with the Broncos, but still a quality player with some upside to him that in the market for what it was, and you saw the Trey Hendrickson deal and everything that transpired with that going to the Ravens. And you saw kind of the dollars and cents of where things were going with edges and whatsoever. It just, or whatnot. It's a quality deal. It's not one like we got him for a steal, but at the same time, I don't think you're overly invested in him either. To the point where it's like you're locked in and you better be ready to just deal with this individual for 3 years because it just makes no sense to remove from your roster if it's not working out. I think it's palatable. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Bills, makes sense for Bradley Chubb. And then ultimately it's something where if you can get the best out of the player, it could even look like potentially a quote unquote steal like signing, come later in the season or later into that contract.
Pulling up the depth chart that Eric Turner from Cover One has posted, the Bills' edge situation prior to signing Bradley Chubb, they obviously had Greg Rousseau on one side, but on the other side, it was really 3 names. It was Landon Jackson coming off of a season-ending injury where he wasn't even all that impressive early on. Michael Hoyt, who looked great for his cup of coffee, who tore his Achilles midseason last year, and then Javon Solomon, who I don't think you can really count on in any specific fashion. What I like about it is you now have Bradley Chubb, who can take the pressure off of Hoyt and Landon Jackson specifically, and what I still expect to be a fairly early pick for the Bills on the edge, where they don't have to hit the ground running. If Hoyt's not ready to go by training camp, he doesn't have to be rushed back. If Landon Jackson still looks a little bit raw or not ready to come back, that's okay. And I do expect edge to be very much in the conversation with the Bills' first round pick, despite them signing Bradley Chubb. Let's see what Roy Collins has to say. I keep hearing people complain about the Chubb contract. 29 million in guarantees doesn't seem terrible. I agree. I think you get what you pay for, Roy, and this is a good example of that. I don't think they overpaid for Bradley Chubb. I think people are mainly frustrated because these are the types of deals that Brandon Beane has made historically. You don't dip your toe into the elite receiver market. You go out and get Joshua Palmer. You get Curtis Samuel. You don't get an elite edge. You get a middle class edge in Bradley Chubb. And then you get enough of those mid tier contracts on your team, plus the franchise quarterback they always tell us about. You can't afford then to go out and splash. So you get enough of these on your team and it adds up. But Luka and I have been fairly realistic about this cap situation the whole time. And while it would have been great to have Max Crosby or great to have Trey Hendrickson or great to trade for Justin Jefferson, which is not going to happen, by the way, by anybody, the Bills just don't have the ability to do that. Luka, I think for the Bills, and I know there's a lot of frustration out there from Bills fans, even after the Chubb signing, that Brandon Beane's sitting on his hands or is content to run it back. I do think that's a little unfair because I think lost in all of this is he did trade for DJ Moore and he did bring back Connor McGovern, who by all lists out there was the second highest rated center in free agency. So when you look at the fact that he addressed wide receiver one, was it everybody's first choice? No, but that was without a doubt a need that we all agreed the Bills needed to address wide receiver one. And when you look at the offensive line situation with bringing back Connor McGovern, there's 4 out of your 5 starters. Plus, they tendered Ryan Vandermark today, and they brought back Alec Anderson on a 1-year deal. So your 2 first guys off the bench last season are also in the fold, keeping 4/5 of the offensive line together, and your 2 first guys off the bench. And then obviously D. Alford should be right in line to start at nickel, out where Taron Johnson left off. And then now the move for Bradley Chubb. I don't think it's fair to say that Brandon Beane has done nothing. I just think I think it is relatively fair to say that the Bills have not had a sexy free agency.
There's no sexy cover page to this year's free agency is kind of the way I'd put it. There's no massive headline to be had. There's no splash that truly can get the entire fan base excited. This is very much a company sending out the memo saying these are the things we're doing moving forward. And you just read it for the sake of you want to understand the direction of the company. But overall, these are not things that you're going to be over the moon excited about. They're just the direction of which we need to go based on resources available. So I don't, I'm not going to sit here and tell or act like I think it's crazy for anyone to be upset with what's going on, because 1, you're always entitled to your opinion, but then 2, at the same time, I can understand if you wanted to finally see them move the needle in a different direction and maybe make that splash or do something after yet another year of coming up short, finally recognizing that it felt like year after year after year you're coming up short. You make the big change at the coaching position, and it's like, hey, maybe there's a personnel recognition as well that we need to get more superstars on this roster. And that hasn't happened through free agency once again. Regardless how you feel about Bradley Chubb, I just wouldn't call him a superstar. But overall, it's not, these are not nothing moves. These are moves that are going to matter, both with the retention aspect of things as well as the newcomers coming in. I think overall, I personally am not upset with any of this. I think this is just, you have a limited amount of resources. You have a limited amount of money. You can only do so much. And ultimately you're trying to stretch the pennies kind of deal. You're trying to make it work as best as you can, evaluating the market, understanding who you can and cannot afford to do and get in this reality that the Bills are in. And I can fully understand that and grasp that concept and accept it for what it is. There's still discussions to be had come the draft time that definitely change where my mindset is, and I would say it's different than how I am agreeable with all of this free agency. But that's because there's a little bit more control when it comes to the things we're limited at, being money and finances, that go hand in hand with the draft. And that's where it's like, hey, you might be able to get that higher quality item for controllable money at a lower number for now, that makes roster building easier to get high end talent. And it's that discussion there is for another week, another time. That it's like right now where it stands, how free agency has gone and what we've seen Brandon Beane do. Me personally, I can understand exactly why the steps have been taken the way that they have. And overall, I'm absolutely fine with everything. I would call it adequate. I would call it and I would say it all makes sense. It all absolutely makes sense. And you're addressing positions of need. You're retaining things that you understand you needed to, but also at the same time not overreaching for other things, in light of like David Edwards, where it's like, hey, we can't afford to have you continue on this nice offensive line we have because the money is just not there. You're best finding somewhere else to go to get your top dollar. And I can accept that that's the reality of the Bills in the 2026 season.
I'm going to bring up Roy Collins' point here. People need to remember it's only day one of free agency. Not all signings have to be done today. Linebacker, safety, and D linemen can still be coming. To that point, Luka, there's a lot of players that are still available that you and I earmarked as good targets for the Bills. For one, really, I think the last really fun safety idea left standing is maybe our favorite safety idea from the beginning. Maybe it was Jalen Thompson. I would have loved to see the Bills in on that, but Jaquan Brisker is still available. And I know there's some talk that he's redundant with Cole Bishop because they both tend to play better moving forward toward the line of scrimmage, but I think they're both plenty athletic where they can play the deep safety as well. And that would be a really intriguing signing. On the defensive line, I'm going to get to defensive line last because I want to ask you about somebody that got released a couple days ago from the Cardinals and see what you think about that idea. But offensive line, we talked about Wyatt Teller. He's still very much out there. And, the guard scene on free agency is still a lot of guys out there. I don't know if the Bills are going to have the appetite to add a veteran guard. I think I'd like to see them do that. But I think maybe they're content to move on with Alec Anderson. They did tender Ryan Vandermark today, which makes me think that maybe they're at least projecting Tylen Grable to move inside the guard and compete at left guard with Alec Anderson. And, and then they could always add another receiver. We talked about Christian Kirk. We talked about Darnell Mooney. We talked about Calvin Austin. There's names out there. I want to talk about defensive line, though. DJ Reader's a guy that's always on our radar, but a guy that's interesting from a couple years back to me, I was really a big fan of. Dalvin Tomlinson was cut by the Cardinals this few days ago. And so because he was released, he won't count against the compensatory formula, very similar to Bradley Chubb. What do you think about Dalvin Tomlinson as an idea to come in and play those nasty, gritty rundowns from the nose tackle and really take some of that pressure off of Deion Walker?
I really hope he's not the player that he was last year for the Cardinals, if that's the sake of it. I like, if you could give me 2024 and older Dalvin Tomlinson, I'm all for it. I would say he took a massive step down in his play last year with the Cardinals. He was very rough at that nose tackle position. And I like the idea of it, though, because we don't have an individual. I mean, he's someone well north of 300 pounds. He's a big, big individual, something that this team does not have. And mind you, I think he's like in his early 30s. I want to say he's like 31, 32 years old right now. It's not like he doesn't have any more tread on the tires. But last year, I would say, watching Cardinals games, he was absolutely someone I did not necessarily I didn't care to see on the field very often because he was much more of a liability. That said, I would say that the player previous to his Cardinals year, he was only there last season, and that team was very bad altogether. So take that for what it is. He was still, a startable player, and I think on a team like ours that lacks a nose tackle, a true nose tackle, moving to this new defensive scheme, I would imagine it's not like his market is going to be crazy high. And overall, you might be able to, with again, the limited resources that you have to work with, you might be able to get an individual like him on the roster. That's kind of like if all else fails. Woo, got there. Uh, he can at least fill that role and be that true nose tackle for run fits and things like that, just clogging up the middle as best as you can, just due to his sheer size. He has capability to play a little bit better. But overall, you're looking at a true just big run stuffer that just eats up space. And I don't hate it, but overall, I would imagine you're not. It's going to be hard to look for much better only because, once again, money is very tight.
Money is very tight. I also think that despite not having a lot of funds to play with, the Bills still need to be looking at receiver. I like the DJ Moore move. I think when you look at what the Bills have right now, it gives them a defined top three: DJ Moore, Khalil Shakir, and Joshua Palmer, particularly with the Shavers injury that happened in the playoffs against the Jaguars. Um, but I am greedy. I don't want the Bills to be in a position where they're relying on Keon Coleman or Joshua Palmer. And that's where they're at right now, is they're relying on one of those guys to be the wide receiver 3 with what they have. So Christopher asks, should the Bills bring in Brandon Ayuk? I'm going to bring that up here now. I am very firmly against that. I've heard some horror stories about his rehab, how he attacks it. I've heard that he's not the best teammate. I love the swing. I love the idea. Usually I like ideas like that, but that one to me, I think there's got to be better ideas out there. Luka, quickly on Ayuk.
Man, if only it was Brandon Ayuk fresh out of Arizona State, and not the Brandon Ayuk that we seem to have in 2026. I'm with you, and I'm definitely someone that's okay to kind of initially look the other way when it comes to potential issues because he was not yet in your building, just in a general sense of player, right? Not in your building, hasn't been established in your culture. Is it a problem while it's here? We don't know yet. But a lot of the stuff coming out of Brandon Ayuk is far from good. And overall, it's disappointing. I always root for my fellow ASU alums, but he's one that it feels like the risk is, unless we're talking veteran minimum with zero commitment and you're truly just bringing him in the door and you could easily let him go by the time mid camp is through. I don't see where it makes a lot of sense, especially considering some of the other cost friendly options that could be out there that actually might be able to fill a role throughout the entirety of the season.
Yeah, like Christian Kirk is still available. We've talked about his ties to Josh Allen. We talked about Darnell Mooney. I think he's a type of player that runs really good routes. He doesn't have the best hands in the world, but he'd give the Bills a little bit of an added dimension. Another player who played with Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco that I'm kind of surprised is still available is Jawan Jennings. Every time he got the opportunity in San Francisco to be the go-to guy, it felt like even when he was running with Ricky Pearsall, he was commanding targets. It felt like he was the guy that Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy believed in more. Maybe they're just having trouble knowing what his market value should be, but this is a guy that plays with an edge. He's a reliable receiver. I think as free agency goes on, he's going to be a guy I think more and more about. What do you think about Jawan Jennings?
I will, until he signs elsewhere, the intrigue is enough there that I'm for it. I will say some of the stuff when you watch Niners games, he does seem like a bit of a head case as well. I think that might be playing into why, based on what the Niners believed his cost was going to be, and then also having him in house for years and seeing upfront and close and personal the kind of the roller coaster that it seems like Jawan Jennings might be, that they're like, hey, we're willing to just go with another direction, aka first ballot Hall of Famer Mike Evans, and you test your market and have fun elsewhere. I'm not sitting here saying that that's something that deters me, but it definitely says something at least. And overall, I wonder if that's also playing into kind of why the league is evaluating Jawan Jennings and just not quite sure where to pinpoint his value ultimately. It could go beyond just simple statistics and everything like that. Who knows? I'm all for taking a swing the longer it goes. If the longer it goes, it seems like it truly is that teams just don't understand where to pinpoint his market value. And overall, if you can convince them, like, hey, take a 1-2 year deal here, you have Josh Allen as your quarterback. If you truly believe you can excel as a wide receiver, what better thing to ask for than this out of world talent at quarterback that can absolutely propel you? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with him, and he'll tickle the interest a little bit there. But again, I wouldn't even put him up there as like the only like the top option for the Bills. Only understanding that currently, I would believe we're priced out of the market for an individual like him at this moment in time.
Yeah, Spot Track has him at a $22 million average annual salary. Let's see. It seems like we have some.
No,
Not true.
I don't
Okay, you
I don't
checked
see
it.
it yet. I don't see it yet. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Philly Mike. Um, what's next for the Bills though? Do you have? Let's say that they're able to address two more positions in free agency. Do you have two that you've earmarked as like you really need to see them get this done?
Receiver. I don't think I have necessarily a lock solid idea, I guess is the way I'd put it. There's plenty of things that interest me, but ultimately I don't know if at safety or man, I got nothing for you at this moment. I can't, there's not one guy I circle and I just go, that's the greatest idea I could possibly read. Defensive line, it just across all things. I don't think I have one guy that I can honestly say is like, this one stands out. This is where I'd go. I'm curious to hear what you would say at this moment.
Well, I mean, just positionally speaking, for me, it's safety, and I don't know who's out there. I mean, we both thought PJ Locke from Denver was a guy that
Yeah.
made a lot of sense for them, and he ends up signing a fairly cost effective deal elsewhere. Cam Lewis, good for him, ended up getting paid. Where did he go? The Bears, maybe.
Yeah. The Bears.
Uh, that's another guy that they didn't bring back. I guess Damar Hamlin is still out there. If you go to Mike Clay's Twitter feed, he posted a list of best remaining free agents. It was a couple hours ago, so I'm sure some stuff is a little bit outdated. But when you look at safety, it really is for me Jaquan Brisker or bust at this point in time. I mean, you could dip back into the Jordan Poyer world if you wanted to.
Ooh.
There's an interesting name listed at cornerback on that list as a guy that we talked about a lot last year when he got released multiple times by multiple teams. CJ Gardner Johnson. So there's names out there, but the Bills cupboard is so bare right now at safety where it almost feels like they almost have to put Jordan Hancock penciled in at the starter or they're going to use their premium pick on safety because it is, Cole Bishop at one safety spot. And then after that, it's Jordan Hancock. And that's about it on the roster. So I don't know. Outside of that, they addressed backup quarterback with Kyle Allen. Don't think they have to do anything with running back or tight end. Obviously, they're in good shape at tackle with the four they have in house. I don't see them going after another edge rusher, but who knows? As these days go on, would they bring back somebody they're familiar with, like AJ Epinesa, Avon Miller? There's a guy from Atlanta. I know people are pretty high on Arnold Ebikiti. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I know people are really high on him. Bill's old friend Leonard Floyd is out there. Kyle Van Noy, just some names to consider, but none of these again are gonna really like get you super duper excited. Let's talk about linebacker. I think linebacker is a position the Bills could really look at as well. And there's a couple interesting names out there, particularly when you talk about the Jim Leonard scheme. And one of the names at the very top of the list is Dre Greenlaw. 2 years ago, he had the massive injury. He was considered one of the best linebackers in the sport. Had a up and down year with the Broncos last year. Played in Jim Leonard. Well, I guess Jim Leonard wasn't the true defensive coordinator, but played with Jim Leonard in Denver. But Dre Greenlaw, Bobby Okereke, Jermaine Pratt, those are some of the bigger names out there. Jack Sanborn, I believe, is the guy that if I have this right, is the guy that played at Wisconsin for Jim Leonard. Any of those names interest you as somebody to come in and give them another option besides Dorian Williams, Terrell Bernard, and Joe Andreessen?
I mean, Greenlaw definitely intrigues me. I think there's a good player in there still that definitely would be interesting to see come in here and stuff like that. Like I was kind of saying to someone like there the linebackers out there all feel like they have a serious deficiency to them, but at the same time, it's like this is the market that it currently is, and what you have in house does feel like it leaves you wanting more at the linebacker, the inside linebacker, the Mike position specifically. That it's like, what do you go with it? And then there's another guy who was awful last year. I'm just gonna start and preface this awful, but he feels like a real linebacker at least. And out of college, I was intrigued by this individual. It just seemingly has not clicked yet. Kenneth Murray feels like a guy you get pretty cheap, and he hasn't been great, but at the same time, he feels like a real linebacker. So it's like at this point, if you're looking for someone in free agency to get pure value on, like Dre Greenlaw, cool. I think there's other guys out there. I mean, Okereke, or however you say Okereke, he's kind of the gem of the linebacker class. But even then, I would say I can't imagine we'd be hitting his market value for sure. And I don't know if we'd be able to get a guy like him. So you'd really have to look elsewhere to try to find something. And Jermaine Pratt does seem like a guy that would be interesting as well. Tackle machine at one point, but overall, I don't know. None of the guys truly jump off the page to me. Dre Greenlaw definitely has a little bit of an interest to me. But like, I mean, I could convince myself that any of these individuals that I'm like thinking of here at least would feel like a more legitimate linebacker to me to have in that group. And then if you just unlock a certain thing to them, it could work out. It's just one of those things too, where worst case, if you're getting this individual on the budget and it just doesn't work out, you're not crippling yourself with anything most likely. That I would love to see them bring in a guy with experience, but at the same time, linebacker is one that I don't know if I'm like pressing for at this moment, just based on who's out there and available.
And what about cornerback? Do you feel good with where they're at with what they have? Because they obviously have Christian Benford, and then they went out and they signed D. Alford to replace Taron Johnson. What and obviously Max Harrison on the other side. What do you think about what they have in house at cornerback? I don't necessarily expect them to do anything more with a veteran, although with a Dorian Strong situation, they could bring in somebody else. This is where losing that second round draft pick for DJ Moore just becomes so costly because it feels like there's a lot of depth the Bills need to plug with picks. I want the high end player in DJ Moore, so I'm glad they did it. That's where I'm just a little annoyed at the overpay, particularly when you see Pittman going for a pick swap, and I think they're on similar levels as players. Um, what about and I just lost my train of thought. What position was it? Oh, cornerback. Anything at cornerback that interests you?
Again, it comes down to market, and that's really what it is. I would like to see them bring in one more if it makes sense, but you'd be talking like, I mean, just to throw out names, like an Avanti Maddox, like a Marco Wilson. I laughed just because as soon as I was like Marco Wilson out there for cheap, I remember numerous seasons of him playing for the Cardinals, and it's like you thought Kyer Elam was bad out of Florida. Boy, you better buckle up for some Marco Wilson action. But then again, we're talking about individuals who clearly would not be coming in with an expectation to play starting minutes. Play, your starters are solidified. It feels like when healthy, you have your 1 and 2 figured out. So from there, my opinion on corner would be if you get a guy like a Jalen Mills, Avante Maddox, someone like that that's been around the league, experience, might have, a year or two left in the legs, it could be worth bringing in if the cost makes sense. Like I do think with Trey White, who is technically a free agent right now, and things like that, you don't have that next man up that you can maybe be comfortable with right now in house currently. I agree with you 1,000% on the second round pick point, because that could be maybe where you could address this problem right now and bring in someone with a little bit of upside that you can have back there that also doesn't have an expectation to play legitimate minutes. But I mean, you made your bed, you got to lay in it. So here we are. I wouldn't mind. This will not be something I expect anytime soon. But at the same time, if you find a good value guy out there, which it does feel like there are some, as long as the price is good, I absolutely could entertain the idea of something like that. Like I'm not sitting here saying they need to sign at all a Trayvon Diggs or a Jack Jones or anything like that. It's like that is not even remotely on the thought process for me. It would be more looking down the list a little bit. I mentioned a couple guys already. I mean, there are a few guys out there. You could get a Jeff Okuda for what it's worth. He's probably not going to cost you much more than Vet Min. Just a guy that's a depth piece, maybe with a little bit of play in him if you really need him. But that would be the extent of corner and nothing more.
The Bills brought back Kyle Allen to be their quarterback too, basically a veteran minimum deal. I think it's like 700,000 above that. I totally am okay with that move. I don't care about the Bills necessarily having the most glamorous quarterback too. I also think that when you look at the contract, it tells me he's probably going to be competing with Shane Buechele. I don't think it automatically guarantees him the quarterback two spot. Kyle Allen was much less than impressive on his first stint with the Bills, but I guess familiarity with Joe Brady and golf partnership with Josh Allen wins out here. I know the old adage is if Josh Allen goes down, we're effed and we don't practice effed, but I think you and I would agree it'd be nice to have somebody that could come in and keep the Bills at 2-2 if Allen has to miss a month, but it's not really a luxury that these Bills can afford to pay for right now.
No, you don't have that ability to really pay for that. And honestly, what else out there is really going to get you that capability without paying for it at all, anyways? Like you'd be looking at a Trey Lance or, Tyrod Taylor for what?
Tyrod.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say the name, but like it's there. But even then, like take it for what it is. Spot Track, I think, has his value at like 4 mil annual, and it's like, do we really need to be spending $4 million on a Tyrod Taylor when you need to stretch your pennies for everything else? No. So overall, yeah, I'm with you. It is what it is, and if this individual has to be playing serious minutes, I don't care who it is at that moment in time because we're screwed anyways.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Roy Collins asking about Cisco. He's a box safety or free safety. What about him? At this point, anybody makes sense. I know he's a good athlete. He's got some experience in the league. At this point, yeah, I'm all on the Brisker train. I'd like to see the Bills do that at this
Yeah.
point, but we'll see what they do. And then Roy, with the two backup quarterbacks we have now, would you rather just draft a guy on day 3? I hear that. The Bills are only going to carry 2 quarterbacks on game day, so I don't really care who the backup quarterback is. If they do decide to draft a guy, cool. On draft day, I'll probably prefer they use that pick on something more useful. I'll be thinking a little bit about kicker on draft day with the way that they renegotiated Tyler Bass down and things of that nature. And then I always want them to take a shot on, say, a speed receiver on day 3, or a cornerback with traits, or add to the offensive line pipeline. They've done a good job of that in recent years. Well, Luka, I don't really have much else to add on these Bills. I mean, we talked about Chubb, we talked about DJ Moore. I don't want to just force another 30 minutes of Bills content just because. Is there anything else on your mind regarding these Bills? I think free agency's a little bit more quiet than we thought, although the Cowboys and Niners just made a trade. Any thoughts that any directions you want to go here?
I'm honestly, I just think what the Bills have done is classic, just get the things you need to do, address some needs that you absolutely have to, but overall, not make sure you bend over backwards to, truly put yourself in a bind moving forward. And then, like I will say, just for NFL purposes, everyone else just enjoying the clown show that is the Ravens. I am going to be locked in as to how NFL GMs, how the league, everyone else, the media handles it handles the Ravens in the sense of, I'm going to just say this now. I think what the Ravens did is Bush League, but also at the same time, I fully understand it. And they did nothing wrong, technically. So it's one of those things where as soon as the NFL allowed for the ability to tamper pre-calendar year starting, and you opened up the capabilities of getting discussions to be had with free agents while technically you cannot get them under contract, and then on top of it, allow you to set up trades and things like that, but you're not allowed to process them until this date at this time. you opened up the avenue for that to be possible. It's just, I don't think anyone thought it would happen to that scale. But overall, I mean, it's a classic, like, props to the Ravens for actually like playing two sides of it and getting it to work out for them in their best interest. But boy, I would love to know how NFL GMs are going to handle Ravens with business moving forward, because this feels like something that absolutely has the potential to rub a lot of GMs the wrong way. And from there, it might affect the Ravens' ability to do business with some. Whether I think that's right or wrong is I don't even know where I stand on that, because again, I think what the Ravens did is absolutely fine. I mean, they're within their right to do exactly what they did, but it is a fascinating little rift that has now been created in the NFL that I'm all for when it comes to entertainment value.
Yeah, it doesn't pass the smell test, right? Like they were negotiating with Trey Hendrickson while Max Crosby was in the building, and the story they're telling you is, oh, we envisioned both of those guys on our team. Yeah, okay. I think I I'm willing to believe that they saw something in the medicals that was a little more concerning than they had hoped for, but I also think that buyer's remorse is a real thing, and as they started thinking about what life would truly like without those 2 first-round picks, and then they were like, "Well, wait a minute, Trey Hendrickson was supposed to get $40 million a year like Jalen Phillips did, and now his market's not even gonna hit 30. Why don't we just do that and save our money?" It feels like maybe they forced those medicals a little bit, and we'll see what happens there. Interesting domino just took place in the NFL, and I don't necessarily mean on the trade that just happened, but I wonder if it could be a precursor to the Max Crosby deal. So sorry, I just got sidetracked by what Jordan Schultz posted. So the
Nice.
Cowboys traded standout defensive tackle Osa. I'm gonna butcher this name. Odighizuwa. I'm so sorry. But very good defensive tackle. Had 17 sacks as a Cowboy to the Niners for a third round pick. Now the Cowboys have opened up, I believe, $14 million more in cap space. If the Cowboys now turn around and trade for the package that it would take to get Max Crosby, their defense would now have Quinnen Williams, Max Crosby, and whatever they decide to do in the draft. What do you think this is a precursor to that? Or do you think Dallas is just offloading a player at a position they're heavy at?
Don't forget Kenny Clark in that conversation too.
They restructured him down too.
Yeah. So I would find it interesting if the move of Odighizuwa going to the
There it is.
Niners
Whoa, Odighizuwa.
does become that first domino for Max Crosby going to ultimately the Cowboys. What's fascinating to me about all of this is it's one of those things where you have someone that set the standard of, hey, 2 first round picks is what it's going to take to get a guy of Max Crosby's caliber. And we showed you that a team was willing to pay it, or were they? So it's something where now if you're the Cowboys, it's still rumored out there. I believe that the Eagles are kind of sniffing around that, maybe even involving Jalen Carter in that conversation. Whatever it is, I will say, for what it's worth, if you're the Raiders and Jalen Carter is on the table and you can get like a first and Jalen for Max Crosby, boy, that could be very enticing to turning things around for the Raiders, as troubled as Jalen Carter might be. I find it fascinating that all these teams now have an actual like baseline understanding of, hey, this is what it's going to take. Because for instance, in Bills terms, I mean, it was early on reported after it fell through that it's like the Bills are not going to re-explore a Max Crosby trade, now understanding what it took. Like, it's like, yeah, we're not willing to move 2 first round picks for that. Whether that makes sense or not, you be the judge. But I do believe Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are the types of individuals who will, for whatever reason, they moved on from Micah Parsons, but all of a sudden they're going to shuffle around all these assets and bring in a Max Crosby, a Texas boy, to now be that new premier edge for them, and is starting to make the space to do so. It would also make sense just from an NFL standpoint, because as great as we might still believe the Eagles to be, I think there's enough holes and there's also enough future projection of understanding the band is not going to be together forever. That the NFC East, as it is much more obtainable for these teams that are in there with them. That's also what made it surprising that the Commanders, for what it's worth, were very quiet throughout free agency for the most part.
The
That it's
Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, they made a couple moves eventually, but early on they were not being very aggressive.
Oh,
And
maybe you're confused. They signed Oway to that massive
yeah, no,
deal.
they eventually started making moves,
Yeah.
but the first hours, if you talk to any fan of the Commanders, like they were memeing them that it's like, why are we not taking advantage? They eventually got there. The reason being is you have a rookie quarterback, of course, and it's like this division is not the Eagles to win. It feels like as much as it was of recent years. There's blood in the water. There's something going on with them that it's like, hey, if you're the Cowboys, if you're the Commanders, if you're the Giants, make your moves, which the Giants, of course, have made plenty themselves as well in this conversation. That, yeah, I could absolutely see Max Crosby going to the Cowboys after this Adigizua move to the Niners.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. I think Max Crosby is probably the next big domino to fall, and maybe the last big domino to fall. It doesn't feel like Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a trade that ends up materializing. Adam Schefter pretty much shot that down. I guess where Kyler Murray ends up going, but it seems like it's a foregone conclusion he's going to the Vikings at this point in time. And then after that, really, free agency is, I don't know. I guess it'll just kind of come down to do the Vikings make any more trades to clear room? But we shall see. I don't necessarily think that there's any more big time splashes out there, but there is some work to do for Brandon Beane and these Buffalo Bills prior to the draft. And we know Brandon Beane likes to go into these drafts without any glaring holes where he doesn't have to really, show his hand as far as what he wants to pick. But yet we always know the position he's going for before the draft starts. So I don't know. Sometimes the messaging out of one Bill's drive is just a little bit confusing based on like the actual results that come out of one Bill's drive, but that's neither here nor there. All right, Luka, let's get out of here. 40 minutes. The Bills signed Bradley Chubb. They traded for DJ Moore. The first day of free agency is here. They did not end up landing a Max Crosby or a Trey Hendrickson. Did not really expect them to do that, but the next time Luka and I'll be back will be on Monday morning for Bills chat. We'll go over any more Bills free agency moves. We will talk about those Sabres that Roy Collins is talking about probably. And then kind of where do we go from here with these Buffalo Bills? But first day of the league year is here. Happy New Year, Luka.
Happy League New Year. Hell yeah.
We will talk to you all next time on Bills Chat.